What's up, everyone? Alex here. Persona 3 Reload. Let's talk about it. Okay, let's see. There's the original Persona 3 release on the PS2. There's Persona 3 FES, which is also released on the PS2. There's Persona 3 Portable, released on the PSP. And the modern re-release of Persona 3 Portable. That makes it a total of 4 times that I've replayed through the entirety of Persona 3, which is actually why it doesn't exist at all in my top 10 most anticipated games of 2024, because I've played a ton of Persona 3 over the past 20-something odd years. Could you believe that? That being said, with the dawn of the release of Persona 3 Reload, that kind of got me thinking a little bit, and a little bit of FOMO here and there, because it does look pretty, the gameplay enhancements seem really appealing, and it just seems like Atlus put out all the stops to reintroduce Persona 3 to perhaps a brand new audience. Now, that brand new audience is obviously not me, so I'm approaching this review from the perspective of somebody who has at least played Persona 3 once and is interested in picking Persona 3 Reload up. Like, how much of Persona 3 Reload's new features will actually keep me wanting to play this game, regardless of my knowledge of the characters and the story? In order to find out the answer to this question, I think it's very important for us to talk about the new gameplay features that Persona 3 Reload has. Perhaps the most important feature in Persona 3 Reload has to be the rewind function. Now, in the old games, you can basically play all the way up to the full moon in the calendar and find yourself facing a really powerful boss, because the game doesn't really incentivize you to go up Tartarus apart from like, hey, get to the top as much as you can, but it never tells you why. And the reason why you should is so that you can level up and be prepared for this specific boss battle. And a lot of players got stuck because guess what? They made a save from yesterday. All of a sudden it's like, oh no, what am I gonna do? The boss is tomorrow and I can't grind. The rewind function fixes that by allowing you to go back a few days before in order to fulfill your objectives, whether it's exploring more of Tartarus or leveling up appropriately for the upcoming boss fight. A feature that is borrowed from Persona 5 is called the shift mechanic. What shift essentially is, it's basically the baton pass from Persona 5, where if you manage to hit an enemy with their weakness, you can actually give somebody else your turn so that they can actually attack the rest of your enemies that have a weakness to that specific character's skills. And of course, you want to do this because the whole deal with Personas 3 to 5 is you want to disable as many enemies as possible so you can unleash an all-out attack. Third-G is a brand new feature in Persona 3 Reload, and what it basically is that every time your character gets attacked or they attack, a meter kind of builds up like really slowly on the side. And once you max it out, you can actually unleash a powerful super-like attack onto your enemies. Now, there is a caveat to this because if you have a status effect, you actually can't use Third-G. So it's kind of an interesting wrinkle that you'll have to consider if you want to unleash Third-G onto your opponents. Shuffle time, which basically happens at the end of every battle, is now similar to P4G than it was in Persona 3 Portable. And this time, it'll allow you to choose any cards that you want. And this is in addition to Arcana bonuses that stack up and make your dungeon explorations a bit easier, I'd say. Kuga and Eiga, which are light and dark spells from Persona 5, were also added to Persona 3 Reload. And like Persona 3 Portable, exploring Tartarus no longer fatigues you. To me, that was really BS, like with the original Persona 3 and FES, that your characters just get tired and they could even get sick for multiple days on end, making them unavailable for Tartarus explorations, which to me, I'm just like, okay, this is really overbearing and I don't want that. And thankfully, Persona 3 Reload just kind of does away with it. So even though there's a lot of really good features for Persona 3 Reload that, you know, makes it a little bit more easier for players to kind of get into, I just kind of played it the way that I have always played Persona, which is I'm gonna just go as far up to Tartarus as much as I can until it just tells me not to. I'm one of those players who basically just uses one evening to just go all the way in Tartarus and use all my resources just to kind of get there. That way, I don't have to worry about having to go as high as possible. That way, I can also be prepared for when the boss battles actually happen. And after that single night of spending all that time going up as far up Tartarus as I can, now I have this gap of time between that night all the way up until the night that the boss is going to spawn, filling it with social links, upgrading my traits and my stats, and also trying to get money and upgrading my gear. And to me, while I like those kinds of secondary activities that you can do, I did really truly enjoy exploring Tartarus this time around, but I'll get to that later. But the point is, what I'm trying to say is that now I have this long length of time where I'm just kind of doing maintenance, as it feels like. Sure, you can talk about character development and whatnot, but pretty much during that time, the main story is kind of stalled. It's just right there until we hit the full moon, do whatever you want. And here's the thing about finishing everything in one night. It's basically not the most exciting, right? I mean, you're doing all these chores and there's nothing really big happening apart from the social links, which, I've already experienced them at least 4 times, so what up? The thing is though, stat ups are a necessity because they block you from unlocking certain social links. And before anything else, I do want to say that my experience is probably very uncommon. I don't think a lot of you out there have played through Persona 3 4 times like I did. Admittedly, I've never heard of anybody else do it. But I am wondering if some of you out there have played Persona 3 at least twice. Let me know in the comments below and let's talk about it. That said, I do have to talk about the missing features from FES and Persona 3 Portable, which basically means that there's no female protagonist and there's no epilogue from FES. Now, of the two that really kind of bother me a little bit, just a little bit, is the lack of the femme protagonist. Now, I understand that it would take a lot more time to kind of implement this character in there because a lot of the interactions are kind of different from person to person, and the social links are pretty much different in some cases. But I think it would be cool to get that as DLC later on and stuff, and to see how that dynamic kind of changes over time between every single person and every single character that you meet. I think it's still well worth kind of exploring. As far as FES goes, I think that side story was entertaining when it was actually available, but it's not something that I'm crying home about, oh no, they don't have that chapter, what have you. And it still exists, obviously, in FES. It's not taking away anything from the story of Persona 3 Reload. And this might sound like a weird negative, but to me, Persona 3 Reload is still Persona 3 with the same characters. The story beats are the same, the characters are practically the same, but otherwise, it's a story that I've played at least once before, especially for some of you here. Despite knowing who these characters are, I actually really like the new voice actors and their takes on these roles. It's kind of like they went through the old dialogue, listened to them, and said, this is how we're going to improve upon them in order to make them their own. And they did such a fantastic job with that I started noticing a change in attitude in me about how I'm seeing this game. Because at first I was kind of like, okay, this is the same story, this is the same characters, what's the value in re-experiencing the game all over again, apart from good memories or nostalgia? And then it hit me. This isn't necessarily for somebody like me who has already played through Persona 3 so many times. This is for the people who jumped into Persona 5 as their first Persona, or even just love Persona 3, but nobody really had a very good reason to come back to play or replay Persona 3. Hence Persona 3 Reload's existence, because now it really is kind of lifting all of the things that we kind of know and love about Persona 3 and making a case for hey, you should replay me because remember, you like me. The Seas Investigation Squad is really cool. And with that comes this gorgeous new presentation that modernizes it with fully 3D environments, a Tartarus that is actually fully realized, that is just up to scale, which is amazing, as well as animated menus that matches the quality of Persona 5. This is one of those things that bridges the gap between 5 and 3, and I know that sounds really weird and funny, but that's kind of how I think of this. It's This is a reintroduction of Persona 3 to people that probably have never played Persona back in the day. And I think this is a really genius move for Atlus to just put in so much marketing and so much production value into this that it basically makes it seem like it can be right next to Persona 5 in terms of presentation, quality, and gameplay. And it's really weird for me to admit that because I'm normally not taken by shiny presentation, but I can't help but think of how the presentation itself really enhanced my experience through Persona 3 Reload. Like, think about it this way, right? It's kind of like buying a new DualSense controller. Either it's like a replacement or just for another player in your household. And then opening it up and feeling it really new, like the ridges are still very fresh. It feels very new-like. And if you're the kind of player like me that likes doing this, it smells really nice too. You know, like there's an excitement there. You know what a controller is for. It plays games. But there's something about experiencing something new in a different form that makes it exciting again. And I also want to bring up Tartarus because in previous iterations of Persona 3, Tartarus is just kind of like this procedurally generated dungeon with just a few palette swaps here and there and maybe variances in the way that they're laid out. But Tartarus, with all the different kind of small additions that they have, also now feels like an actual place. It's an imposing, threatening, and intimidating place to be, and that's what Tartarus should be. And they managed to nail that completely. If anything, like just getting lost in Tartarus was so much fun that I kind of forgot that I knew the storyline that I'm playing, even though I still know the fate of everybody at the end. There's also fantastic reorchestrations of classic songs in the game, though I have to be honest that in its own kitschy way, I kind of miss some of the old vocal stylings from the previous iterations. Honestly, Burn My Bread is still one of my favorite things in Persona 3. I can't help it. So, Persona 3 Reload, what do I think of it? I think it's still a great game, and I can't believe how much the presentation actually really lifted my opinion of the entire piece, even though I played through the game so many times and know the characters in and out. I think it's also very interesting to note that Katsura Hashino, who directed Personas 3, 4, and 5, was not involved at all with this remake. He's busy making Metaphor ReFantazio over there, you know that game. And I've always had this feeling that Persona 3 Reload is this kind of intermediary that serves as kind of like training for the new staff who basically took over the studio for Hashino and teaching everybody else how to make a Persona game without having to worry about the plot and the story and everything, and to kind of tweak things here and there. Besides, the director and the people running P Studio right now, a lot of them were responsible for FES, Golden, and Royal. Those are basically kind of like a little bit lifted up expansions to the original. And this is them kind of trying to find their own identity by recreating a game from the past. And for the most part, I think that they're really successful. And I'm actually not surprised if their next move is to remake 4. And 4 is my favorite out of all of them. It's pretty dang amazing. And the idea of just kind of moving from 3 to 4 to properly train their employees on the ways of Persona, if you will, makes the prospect of Persona 6 really exciting because in a way, Persona 3 Reload is just their first step in their journey to make their own original Persona game. And I actually can't wait to see what they can come up with next. But until then, this is an excellent remake of a game that a lot of people have wanted to replay over the years that would force them otherwise to pull out their PS2s from their garage or what have you for old time's sake. Persona 3 Reload does a really good job of capturing all those classic feelings with a brand new veneer and presentation that everybody is going to enjoy, both new and old fans alike. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll see you in the next video.